Did you buy this when Stardew Valley patched out of working for your Steam Deck? And you're like, what else is exactly like Stardew Valley that I can play right now?
I don't know if it was immediately after, but maybe on the third time of booting up Stardew Valley and it still wasn't working.
Yeah.
I've heard things about this game.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Hey everybody, welcome to Pursuing Pixels. My name's Kevin Portelli and I'm here tonight with John Hines.
Hey there.
And Randall Nolery.
Hey folks.
And we've got the full crew back in the house once again. I had to sit one out for my very first time ever. So
yeah,
John and Randall were kind enough and to hold down the fort while I was out last week or last time around. I haven't gotten around to editing that episode just yet, so I'm excited to hear what you guys ended up talking about there. And
thank you for hosting, John.
Yeah, seriously. Thank you for hosting. Thanks for holding down the fort.
It happened before the Luka Doncic trade. We had so much NBA talk that just gets thrown out the window.
Oh, man. That's too funny.
Yeah,
that's too funny.
Yeah, honestly, it upends a lot of that.
But yeah, as always, we're back to talk about some video games. And I know I've been doing a ton of gaming. I'm not going to get into too much of what I've been playing as of late, but yeah, we've all been doing quite a bit of gaming as of late. And I know, John, we might have even touched on this game before in passing based on some of the other stuff you've talked about recently, but I don't think we've actually dove into it proper, or given it a proper shout out here.
Yeah, we've definitely mentioned it on at least to save it for the cast, but I've been playing a lot of Fields of Mistria by NPC Studios. And it is a Stardew Valley-like. It very obviously, it is doing a lot of the same mechanics, has a lot of the same, layout, but, has a much better menu system, has a lot of polish in specific areas, notably in the character. I mean, Stardew Valley has, a really robust romancing mechanic, and every character has their own storylines that as you advance you get deeper into, and a lot of different cutscenes, but this one definitely feels like it's trying to expand on that, and it's kind of the thing that I'm experiencing as I'm playing more of the Fields of Mistria, is that the things that it is doing more of in comparison to Stardew Valley, and it's kind of difficult to not just draw comparisons between it and Stardew Valley just because of how similar they are. But the things that it does more of are not necessarily things that I found lacking in the original or in Stardew Valley. And the things that I was definitely running into in Stardew Valley where I'd be like, oh, it'd be nice if they smoothed this out or made this a little bit smoother, are not fixed in Fields of Mistria. So it really just feels like a lateral move. It's not any worse or better than Stardew Valley. It kind of just has its focus on different areas, and it has more of a skill tree mechanic and more, I forget what the name of the experience system is that you use to get additional skills that unlock more mechanics in the game, but none of them are particularly more complicated or less complicated than Stardew Valley. So it doesn't feel all that different when I play it, but at the same time, there's a little bit of a difference where it's all right, I know my animals like it more when they're outside, and you have to manually do that instead of just having the door open at all times, and they would just do it on their own in Stardew Valley. So in Fields of Mistria, you have to go out, you have to ring the bell to send all your animals outside. And so I do that first thing in the morning, and then I go over to my crops, and then I start watering them. But, I have a skill that if I water a crop, it'll sometimes give me a seed or that same crop. Or if I harvest it, it'll do one of another things that I've leveled up a skill tree for. So there's more like really minute differences between it and Stardew Valley, but like it's very interesting. Like I think it's kind of interesting that there haven't been more clones of Stardew Valley. Like I know that Graveyard Keeper came out, and like that is a complete tonal shift from Stardew Valley.
Yeah. And there's tons of like farming sims, but I know what you mean. Like there's not that many that like just kind of look so right on the nose. And because even Graveyard Keeper has like kind of a similar like 16-bit ish aesthetic to it, and just kind of a similar scope, I guess, from what I've seen.
But like it's really charming. It's really well made. Like there's I think still a lot of jank in Stardew Valley that just isn't present in Fields of Mistria. And so like it's a very polished game that like I don't know, like I feel like I am giving a lukewarm reaction to a game that I genuinely like that I think is good. But like I just find it difficult to talk about and like kind of like sing its praises when I don't think it's necessarily doing a ton that's unique, but like all that it's doing is good. Like I like, I like that the recipes are far more complicated. I like that, you have to do a lot more of like inventory management, which maybe is not a selling point to other people. But like there is the self-directed play of these types of games where it's like, okay, well, at the very least in Fields of Mistria, which is like one of the best things that is far and away a vast improvement over Stardew Valley, is that like anything that is in any chest is available for crafting anywhere. So like all you need to do is just put an item in a chest and you have access to it at anywhere. Cool. And like that is such an improvement over Stardew Valley.
Oh, let me go grab this. Let me lug it over here. I'm running out of room. Yeah, that's actually really cool.
Yeah, but at the same time, like you still just have to put chests all over where it's like, all right, I still don't have that much inventory space on my body, so I need to keep stocking up things around the place. And like that is the core gameplay mechanic. Like, okay, you're full up on your inventory, so you need to deposit it somewhere, and like then you can craft it or move it someplace and do something with it. And like I don't know, there's not a ton more to talk about, which I've found difficult to bring up, because I like this game. I think this is a good game, and I think that they're going to be doing a lot more. I know it's like they have
I was just going to say it's still in early access, so the fact that you're like talking about it being so polished and everything is really cool. Like usually you don't see that, like you can kind of what about like mechanically? Are you finding there like to be like any like bugs or janky elements where you're like, oh, this doesn't feel like it's working how it's supposed to, or does it like feel polished across the board? Because obviously look wise it definitely just looks like a real nice clean game.
I've not encountered a single bug, which is
that's like, saying something for any game, let alone early access.
That's very impressive to me. But I really like the vibrancy of the visuals.
Me too.
Like I was saying before we started that it reminded me of like Master System, and it's kind of like almost pastel vibrancy, if that makes sense. I just like the look of this game.
Same.
That's a thing that like is kind of a double-edged sword, whereas like I think it's like it looks great. It's very like well polished and like really clean, but like I kind of like the jank of Stardew Valley. Like I like how it looks a little funky, but then also all the characters look great. Like there's kind of a huge like gap between the quality of things in Stardew Valley, whereas like this is more uniform. This is more like everything is kind of clean, and like that's not a knock. That's not a thing that I should complain about. But at the same time, I was like, I don't know. I kind of like the funkiness. I like the fact that like skill trees lock you out of things in Stardew Valley, like, and that you can like have some parts that are just like either walled off or difficult or harder that like you just don't get in Fields of Mistria, because it's like a better balanced game. And like, but to me, for whatever reason, like, I don't know, I kind of like the jank more.
Yeah.
I feel that.
Yes.
It forces like a variety of experience that when people are talking about it afterwards, right? Like, no, I went and did this. How did you do that? Like, oh, I'm never going to experience that because I made this choice 10 hours ago, right?
Yep. Yeah.
What about soundtrack and sounds? I mean, I know Stardew is known for that. We were singing the praises of the soundtrack of Stardew before, but
all sitting here ready to drop $100 on a vinyl collection.
I mean, yeah, it's good. Like that's the thing is that like everything about Field of Mistria is good, but like I think like I don't know.
I don't know what word I'm looking for, but Stardew just has a little bit. It has like that spark, you know. It's like the little engine that could, like, it's like, oh, this one person was just like, I'm gonna make this game, and like, for better for worse, like I'm just gonna figure out a way to do it, and like in some cases it works out great, in some cases not so much, but it's like it all comes together in this like kind of magical way that it's like, I don't know, this game is just one of a kind, even though obviously there's now a few others of a kind.
Yeah, like Studio Pixel-esque a little bit that way, like one person's vision and just like seeing that through, right? You know?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I do think that there are like this is definitely going to be the much better version of that game for people. Like I think that some people are going to like come to Fields of Mistria and like everything that, they changed that wasn't for me is going to work for them. And I think like I like that we're getting more variations on a formula so that like, people who may have liked Stardew Valley, but like, it wasn't hitting in all cylinders for them.
Yeah, or found it a little rough around the edges.
Sure. Right. Now there is another option that is very good. And like I think that I like that there are more versions of games available for people that are competent, have a lot of care put into them, and are doing different things within a same formula. Like I know that now I may have had like the monkey's paw of like back in 10 years ago, I was like, oh, nobody's making Metroidvanias. And now I've got more than I could ever want to play. But I still think it's better to have more of a genre than to have less. So
totally I'd rather see more people's like iterations and takes on what they like about that genre or game. And,
Yeah, and I hope this inspires someone else to like do their version of this and like take it a little bit further in a different direction.
Exactly. Heck yeah. Well, if you're good there, John, I think I'll move on over to what I've been playing lately. Like I said, I've been playing a bunch of stuff, but one of the things that I've kind of scooped up recently and gone, I was going to say back to, but I've never played it before, but definitely gone back into the past to play this one in the sense of it's been out for a while. It's FTL, Faster Than Light. And this is, we were talking about it. It came out in, I think, 2012. Yeah. So this is like 12, 13 years old now. But I was listening to a podcast the other day and the game came up and I was like, you know what? I never played that game and I don't even think it's on my Steam wish list. So let me at least put it on there I'll scoop it up on sale down the road. I've said this a million times on the podcast, but I always like kind of I'm more of a console gamer. So like, let me wait and, wait for it to come out on Switch or whatever platform of choice. But this game is like, I was like, okay, at this point, number one, it's 12, 13 years down the road. It's probably never happening. And it does seem like a game that like, does feel a little more driven to like play with a cursor or touchscreen controls, like very much like, even though people have definitely like our pal Turd Boomerang in the Discord, among other people, have like kind of sold me on it in the sense of like, yeah, it's cursor based, but you're not like I tend to like steer away from any like action game where I really have to be like on the mouse and keyboard because I just can't hang with those kind of controls and be like, as fluent as I need to be. Because it's just not familiar to me. And I guess I could just get there at some point if I practice, but I just don't have the patience. Right. But for this, like, that's like, okay, you can pause the game at literally any point in time, decide what you want to do. Because it is a real-time strategy game for the most part, at least when it comes to like doing any kind of combat or any kind of like scenario, I guess, that you get into. It snaps into like kind of like a real-time combat situation. But again, you can pause that at any point and be like, okay, let me assess the situation, figure out what the enemy's doing, figure out what is going on my ship. And again, I guess the core conceit here in the game is like you're trying to like, I guess, traverse the nebula or whatever I don't know what all the terminology is, but you're trying to like, in traditional kind of like roguelike map progression, you're trying to like move your way through all these nodes. But the way this game works is it's like broken up into a bunch of different nodes. Like basically you have your like roguelike map on like the first zone, and then it like once you clear that zone, it's like, oh, here's a bigger roguelike map that you have branching paths on, and then okay, pick the node that you want to go to there, and then you zoom in to like more of like the, you know, the map with more of the independent nodes that are all going to have like a different scenario, because it's not always a battle. This game is very interesting. It's from the same team that made Into the Breach, which is a game I've played a very good amount of, not a ton. But you know, I've definitely, like, I wouldn't call myself an expert. I've never beaten that game or anything like that, but I've played a decent amount of it on Switch. And these games are they're very similar in a lot of ways, like thematically and everything, but they are very different. Whereas like Into the Breach, like, you know everything that's going to happen. That's kind of what everybody praises about that game, is like, okay, it's like chess, you know, it's like, and even more so, like, you know, every move that the enemy is going to do for the next turn is telegraphed. It's entirely turn-based, and you know you're basically trying to either mitigate taking damage or, you know, pushing enemies into situations where they're going to damage themselves, or, you know, whatever it might be. Where in FTL, you're kind of like, it's very much like rolling the dice a lot more. Like, you know, you're like taking chances and like, okay, what's going to happen here? Like, for example, like, when you're going to these different nodes, like anything can happen. It might be like, oh, you came across a pirate ship and they decided to attack you, and it's just, okay, I'm immediately in a battle. Or, hey, you came across a pirate ship, but they didn't quite notice you because they're preoccupied doing something else right now. Like, do you want to get the jump on them and try to get, you know, steal some scraps, or do you want to just like ignore them and, you know, hit the road? And so you kind of like are presented with all these different like kind of little like, you know, story beats, if you will, in between scenarios. Or like, hey, you came across like a ship with a bunch of like refugees and they're trying to get away, but like you can like try to rescue them, or like, you know what, hey, my ship's in pretty bad shape as it is, you know, myself, or I'm out of missiles and I can't, you know, do any damage to them right now, because you have a few different types of weapons, and obviously you're upgrading your ship. This is very much, again, like a roguelike situation, but like I've only scratched the surface. I played like maybe 8 or 9 runs. I played a run just before actually we hopped on the podcast here tonight. I had probably my best, or I had, at least high score wise, I had my best run yet. Nice. I have no idea how it's actually tallying the score. I think it's just based on like that, you know, kills you get or whatever, but it's really interesting. Like, you're kind of like on the left side of the screen, you have this like top down view of your ship. And then on the right side of the screen, if you're in an encounter, it's the, enemy's ship. And it's almost like when you're looking at your ship, it's like a side on perspective, or it's like turned horizontally. And then usually the enemy ship is like vertical up and down, but you're like, you really have to like target specific rooms in the ship. Like, so like, okay, I got to take down their shields first with my missiles, because those will go through the shields. And then once I take down the shields, then I can fire my other weapons at the different rooms. And then you have your crew members that you can send to different areas. Like if they're manning their station, that station kind of gets like a temporary upgrade while they're manning the station. But they can also, if that station takes damage, they can start like repairing it. You can send them to the med bay to heal them. You can just do all sorts of crazy stuff. Even just before I hopped on, like our pal Turd Boomerang was telling me like, hey, make sure you like shut off the oxygen and open the airlocks to, you know, put out the fires. And I was like, oh well, I could have used that tip before I hopped on here, because I've been like, that's been the main way I've been dying.
If you have a full robot crew, you can just have all of your airlocks open all the time because they don't need to breathe.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure we were going with enemies if they've boarded you. Going there. Like it's incredible. It's such an involved game.
It's
in
like
terms
crazy
of mechanics, but like, I never got good at FTL. Like, that's the thing where, like, I did, like, a bunch of runs, but, like, I never really felt like I got a handle on the mechanics. Whereas, like, Into the Breach, like, I understood the mechanics. I just didn't, like, get good at the game until I did a bunch of it. Whereas, like,
so hard.
FTL was just, like, I felt so overwhelmed by, like, a bunch of the stuff. But, like, I feel like I probably would be able to get better at it now, having played a ton of Into the Breach.
Yeah, no, I'm having a very similar experience too. Like, I kind of thought like, oh, I love Into the Breach. I'm going to go back to their, you know, original game and, you know, be able to dive right in and be pretty decent at it. And you don't get that feedback in the, like, because I kind of feel like I'm just like doing the same thing every time. It's like going out and like, okay, I don't really like I haven't upgraded enough stuff on my ship yet. or gotten far enough to like do anything crazy. So like really my only option is to like fire a missile at their shield, hope that I take it out, and then you have a limited amount of missiles. So like if I don't have enough, like I got to start trying to conserve those, and then just shooting. Like sometimes the enemies have like a drone. Sometimes they have like a teleporter room that will teleport enemies onto your ship that'll just start like breaking stuff down or trying to kill your enemy or to kill your crew members and stuff like that. But it's just such a cool, like frantic game. It gets so frantic so fast. Like just like even what did I try to do right before? It was like, oh, do you want to try to protect this person? Or no, they were like, they teleported onto my ship and they were like, oh, please, like, rescue us, save us or whatever. And I was like, I'd been like doing all like kind of, helping everybody out. Oh, hey, there's a distress signal over here. I was like, I just had that kind of go in that run. So I was like, okay, you know what? Yeah, I'll help these guys out. And then they're like, it was a trap.
No.
They sabotaged your ship. You took 5 damage. And then now you're in a battle and like half your ship's on fire. And I was like, oh my God, just when I was like, hey, I'm having a pretty good run here. And then next thing you know, it's just like the ship is just getting blown to smithereens. Mm-hmm. But I had a pretty good right when I died, I was like, oh, I'm finally starting to like rack up some, I forget what the currency is in the game, but like these gears or whatever that you spend. But you can really like it's so open ended too.
Yes.
Like you can really like at any point, as long as you're not in combat currently, like as soon as you take down that ship, like before you jump to the next sector, you can take as much time as you want to like number one, like repair stuff or heal your guys or whatever in real time. But then you can pause the game, go into like this ship menu that you can like upgrade your engines, upgrade your security system, or not security system, but sensor system, upgrade your like anything on the ship. And then there's like multiple tabs, like upgrade your crew members, upgrade your,
Nice.
You're picking up weapons. Sometimes you'll just come across like a debris field and it's like, do you want to explore, take the risk of, running into some, scraps or debris or whatever and take some damage, but you might find something good, or I don't know. I just really like, I do tend to lean more towards stuff like Into the Breach where it's more like, exactly what's going to happen. Even if you lose, you're like, okay, well, I know why I lost. I just couldn't figure out how to stop that attack. Where this is like, oh man, I got tricked, or oh, I would have never thought that was going to happen. And it's like kind of annoying, especially because these runs aren't short. It's definitely like a game where you can put, like, if I wouldn't have died on that last battle that I died on, I was like, okay, whatever happens here, I'm going to save here and call it quits, which is, I think, part of why I was like, well, let's just see what happens here. Because I knew I was kind of quit that run there anyways. But
I kind of like the spiciness of that, though. I don't know.
Yeah.
Once in a while, I like roguelikes that just kind of throw me for a loop. Just throw the monkey wrench in there. Not like, no, fuck you, man. This is this thing you weren't expecting. Because, like, I've never played FTL. From the outside, it just was kind of seemed like, and I did not look much into it. But I'm like, it's just probably some very, like, dry, slow-paced kind of strategy sim game, like, whatever. Yeah. But this sounds way more interesting to me as you both describe it.
Yeah.
The two games that like I was thinking about as you were describing it, just because I haven't thought of the game in a while, but like I really like Lovers in a Dangerous Space Time, where you have to like physically move to the different parts of the ship, where like someone's working on the engines.
Platformer version of that, multiplayer platformer version of that.
And like that was a thing that I always loved about FTL was like, okay, well, I need to have someone manning the shields. I need to have someone like in the like med bay or like working this part. Like, so actually like that was the part of the real-time strategy that I always liked, having someone go to a physical space on the ship. But like a game that I've never played, but like now that I'm thinking about the things that I like about FTL and, the open-endedness of it and how you go through and have different runs based on where you're going. And like, I've never played the Stellaris series and I've heard good things about it. And like, it's something kind of like that where, everything's different. Like you're always having a unique situation because of like the simulation of it, or like, how the systems of the game interplay and add in the randomness of it. So like, yeah, I definitely want to come back to FTL because I've not played it in years.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad I scooped it up. I don't even think I mentioned like when I went to like when it sparked and I was like, oh, let me add it to my wish list. And I went to go do that and it was on sale for $2. So I was like, oh, well, this is so much for adding it to the wish list. Let me just add it to my cart and grab this right now. And yeah, I'm very obviously more than worth $2 and wouldn't have even been mad if I spent the full 10. I will say it's kind of an ugly game.
Yes.
Like especially like Into the Breach is like I like the pixel art in that game. I mean, it's not like my favorite looking game or anything like that, but I enjoy the way it looks. But this game is like really primitive. Like it's just like really kind of in that Stardew kind of way.
Yeah,
it's like a little bit.
It came
janky.
out at similar times.
Like it's just kind of like it just works. It gets the point across. It works, and that's kind of all you need. And it's really really good stuff. I'm really having a good time with it. And I'm looking forward to playing more. And the music, oh my god, I can't believe I haven't talked about the music because I think it's the same composer from Into the Breach. I'm so glad. I've been trying to think of his name all day, and I haven't been able to think of it. But yeah, I really am a huge fan of Ben Prunty's stuff. And the way this game does the music, like, so the way all those scenarios come into play, like as soon as like, oh, this pirate ship is like, you know, they don't see you or something like that. And right at the last second, they like, you know, the story beat will say like, you were spotted or something like that. And the music will like right at that moment, like kind of ramp up a little bit and like shift to a different track. Like the way it like so dynamically flows with whatever's happening in the game is just really adds even more to an already great soundtrack. Like it really enhances the like decision making, I feel, which is something, maybe it's because I had the headphones strapped on and stuff too while I was like streaming it or playing it a minute ago too on the Discord. But I don't know, that's something that doesn't usually, like, I don't really get sucked into like story and like decision making in games. I usually like breeze right through that, and like I'm enjoying that part of this game a lot.
No, that speaks a lot to your experience in particular, Kevin.
Yeah. I think the thing that like you were describing it as like ugly, but like it does like just give it such like a singular character of like, yeah, this is what this game looks like. It's like the Into the Breach like FTL like kind of like aesthetic. Like it built itself like space that it doesn't really look like other things. It looks like itself, and like added that to the Ben Prunty soundtrack. Like they really just feel so singular of like a setting and like a place and time that like you don't get if it like spends a lot of time like, you know, being a little bit more polished, being a little bit more pretty. Like it looks like it, and it's great for it.
Yeah, the first time I ended up, I don't know if it's called the Nebula. I think I've said that word about 5 different times in 3 different contexts during this discussion. But like at the first time you're like, oh, you get into this gaseous like area. And like I thought because I had the setting set to like the zoom setting because it just the full screen was acting weird on my computer when I had it hooked up to the TV. So like I'll use the zoom setting, and I was like, oh, this has to be some weird like pixel artifacting because I have this zoom setting on. And I tried like all the other settings, and I was like, nope, that's just the way it looks. And I couldn't believe it. But it doesn't matter. It's like it's like a situation where it's like the visuals just don't matter at all as long as it like clearly telegraphs what's happening. That's all you need to know.
Yep,
totally.
But yeah, we've got one more game that we wanted to talk about here, and kind of a rare occurrence where we've all been playing this one. But I know, Randall, I think you were the first one to kind of like unleash this game, if I'm not mistaken. Although I think John may have tried first, but you may have been the first one to actually get a chance to fire this one up. So why don't you take the lead here?
Yeah, I feel a little bit like a poser to be the one leading this when I've definitely played the least Lonely Mountains downhill of y'all. I know that for a fact, talking about like the daily run. And like I've never booted a daily run in my life on that game. I might have unlocked like half of that game, and I like that game a lot. Just kind of time and place of when it came out. I just wasn't my deal at that time. But Lonely Mountains Snow Riders is the actual name of this game, where you are skiing as opposed to biking, and otherwise you are still going downhill lots of times. But I have really been enjoying this, playing it on Game Pass via Xbox Series X, and Yeah, it's was not that hard to pick up and play from my kind of built-in muscle memory from Lonely Mountains Downhill, I'll say, just from the get-go. Very similar. Very similar aesthetic visually and, sound effect, soundtrack, audio wise, where, kind of minimalism a little bit in both respects, I would say. Maximizing gameplay feel, trying to get from point A to point B through these typically, I don't know, like sometimes like 10, not 10, maybe like 8
usually
sections,
like 6 or 7
6,
or something. The
somewhere,
level I just did right before we hopped on had like I think 5 checkpoints. It was one of like the Black Hills, but I think the one before that had 6 or 7. Yeah,
nice. And I've unlocked like 3 of the mountains so far, so I've been burning on it pretty good.
Yeah.
And I've unlocked most of the achievement markers because it's say like get through the entire like run in this amount of time with this many crashes or falls. I can't remember exactly how they label them, but that's the idea. And John had a good point the last time we recorded, saying with like Lonely Mountains how awesome it is that in the first segments there's no penalty for crashing, for being a little bit more aggressive on the front side, which is such a little thing but a massive thing, right?
Yeah,
just in how you feel about it and like the momentum you take into that run and like how you can kind of get into a groove faster by being maybe a little bit more aggressive in that first section. And typically the first section might be the easier section too, but it helps you build your confidence in your game feel as you go through that rest of that run, right?
Or though it might often offer like a secondary path that's I can take this super risky shortcut, but because I'm not getting penalized, I can just go for it like 40 times in a row until I get it. And then, got the checkpoint. Okay, now it's time to start playing for real.
Yes.
You could break all your bones many times over, and the one time you get it right is all you need to have shaved a couple of seconds off.
Yeah, just register that checkpoint. That's all that matters.
But I love, like I said, it feels really the same, but like I really, really like how it leaves like snow tracks of where you went before in a segment, like a ghost run of sorts.
Almost like a Super Meat Boy kind of thing, like your replay kind of situation or your blood splatter.
But you can reposition yourself where it's like, all right, I know I crashed when I followed that path, so if I move
that is
just
a nice
a
touch.
little bit more to the left, then I can maybe make this really risky maneuver that I've just ate shit on before.
Yes,
that's a nice enhancement. That's a nice addition, because I don't think they had any kind of like pathing or trailing in Lonely Mountains Downhill where you could see like the trajectory you took on your previous
It was so
attempts.
faint and only on the dirt. Like it wouldn't show up on the like grass or stuff, but like it would yes, it is so much more pronounced on the snow. And it's notably on the deep snow. So like if you're on like a shallow snow or ice, there is no pathing.
Oh, true. Good point. Yeah, that's and in the deep snow too, it's like you're noticeably like slowing down. And granted, just like in Lonely Mountains Downhill, you can unlock different gear that can change your attributes, and maybe you'll be a little bit faster on that ice surface or whatever versus your default state. But that kind of changes it up a little bit. But generally speaking, ice is where you're, at least for me, losing some momentum and trying to make sure I'm straight shotting. Set myself up where my momentum can carry me across this chasm, right?
Hitting a patch of snow just so that you can turn ever so slightly to readjust. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is like a little counterintuitive. Like you're thinking like, oh, I'm going to hit this ice and go flying, and it's like, oh, you actually kind of like almost like skid out if you're not like on the right path, Yeah.
Yeah. You kind of lose control there to most of the degree,
Yeah. It's like curling at that point.
Yeah. And the other mechanic to really like harness in on is the kind of like going down in your crouch motion with, on Xbox, it's the A button or whatever. That's kind of just like crouching down so you can really like reduce, whatever the wind
Get those
effect.
aerodynamics.
Yeah, the aerodynamics on your own body. and like just really zoom down that son of a bitch when you get like a good like high degree hill there, basically, where the grade is giving you the opportunity to kind of do like a slalom effect. You're really shooting down that hill, and hopefully there's a jump at the bottom where you can get some air. Often when I do that though, I'm overshooting it, and then I'm like shit, I need to like slow down ASAP and not fall.
Yeah. Or I'm like way offline, like, oh, this looks pretty good, and then I'm like, oh, I landed like nowhere near the actual like path that I'm supposed to land on, and just like off the mountain to the side.
Yeah.
They definitely, I feel like they put a little more emphasis on like the jumps in this game over Lonely Mountains Downhill.
Yep.
A thing that I've like really enjoyed, like I remember after the first mountain, like kind of feeling a little lukewarm on the game, just because I was like, I loved Lonely Mountains Downhill so much, and like this didn't do a lot differently. And again, it was like the things that it's doing differently aren't necessarily the things that like, I don't know, I'd necessarily wanted changed, but like
right.
Once I got to the second mountain, like it started introducing a lot more of water into it, because like you would start at the top and it would be all ice, and then by the time that you got to the bottom of the mountain, there'd be just a lot of melted water, or like ice that turned into water. And so like it added this whole new mechanic where if you hit a patch of water fast enough, you could kind of like skid over it. Whereas if you're going too slow, then you'll like sink to the bottom and crash.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So like it was adding a lot more different stuff. And then by the time you get to the third mountain, like there's just so many paths available.
Yeah.
Like it added such a variety that like just isn't present in Lonely Mountains Downhill. And so like it was only at the second and third mountain that like I got really like into what it was doing differently, as opposed to like the first mountain, which was, for like, honestly, like I was like, this is just not as good as Lonely Mountains Downhill. But like I think part of it was also like, it's a lot faster than Lonely Mountains Downhill. And
interesting. I'm having the opposite experience, but I'm happy to hear everything you're saying right now, because I'm like, okay, I'm like only on the first mountain, and I'm like, it's not as good. But now that everything you're saying, I'm like, okay, I got to keep playing.
Like, because the first mountain, and I think for all of them, like I felt like the game was moving a lot faster, and because of that, the camera is, I think, zoomed out more, and you have just a lot more time to react to things. So like I would make it down, like I would clear the blue. I don't even think they actually call it blue circle. It says like the blue run and like the black run, or like because they don't call it like blue circle and black diamond or whatever. Which also, like, I don't know, if you were planning on making more content for this game, which I think they are, like I was like, why don't you just do blue and then green? Like there's already stuff. Are you going to add a middle tier if you add more stuff, or I don't know. Anyway, not important. But like I would just like clear everything on the first time, just because like it's the thing, you only need to clear a time limit to unlock the next trail. And like the zoomed out camera, the bigger time to react, like having played the first game and kind of knowing how like they try to do paths, or like where they might put a shortcut in terms of things, like
the visual language of it, kind of.
Like it was a lot easier. But then, as you're getting through into the later stages on the second and third mountain, it's starting to throw things that like just aren't present in Lonely Mountains Downhill. And I was like, okay, now I see what you're doing differently, and it's going to need a new skill set for me to like actually get better at. And that's fun. Like I think it's great, because they are so good at making levels.
Yes.
Like you said, all the branching paths, which I think even in Lonely Mountains Downhill, I mean, even still, every time I play that game, I'm like, oh my God, you can go this way too. Yeah. And same thing when I'm playing this, although like I've only on the first mountain. I just like almost unlocked the fourth trail. And that's one thing that you just mentioned, John, that's a huge improvement. So in Lonely Mountains Downhill, you have to, the first time you play any trail, like it's on like explorer mode, and you like have to just beat the stage, and like even if you did clear it in like and would have cleared the time challenge or beat it in X amount of crashes or fewer, it doesn't register because you just have to like clear it that one way first, and then now you do the beginner challenges, now you do the other challenges. So like the fact that it just opens that up right away is a huge improvement, because I've been going back and playing Lonely Mountains Downhill, and I probably would have played even more of that game if because I played a lot of it on Game Pass originally, and then I bought it on Switch. So then it's like, oh, now I got to re-unlock all this stuff again. So I still am like, actually, I've just been kind of like, okay, let me commit to just like doing the basic challenges and just unlocking all the trails and mountains again, and then I'll just like dive into this game proper. Especially now that I know the Switch 2 is going to be backwards compatible. Like I can just like lean into like, okay, this is the version of Lonely Mountains Downhill I have, and I'm just going to unlock stuff on here. But yeah, Lonely Mountains Snow Riders, like as soon as I saw it was on Game Pass, I was like, oh, nice. Right before my subscription ends, like, Downhill again. But like truly, I would put it in like, I hate saying my top 10 games anymore, but top 10% of games, like definitely one of my favorite games I've ever played, and still like playing it again recently holds up with that. And Snow Riders just feels like, to me, feels a lot slower. Like to me, as soon as like, if you want to get going on the bike, like if you're trying to take like a shortcut path, like you can just like, okay, because it feels like you're just going downhill. There's more friction from the snow, I guess. So like when you really have to like kind of get going, I guess like, so after you wipe out in Lonely Mountains Downhill and you're starting from a checkpoint again, it's like you can just get going again right away. Where like every time I feel like when you wipe out in this game, it's like, okay, I gotta, depending on what checkpoint you're at and what, sometimes you are lined up like, okay, now I'm going right down this huge ramp immediately and like going off this huge jump, which on the third trail, which is what I was just playing, I did have, like I just played the Black Diamond and just the regular one before that. And I was like, okay, there were some cooler moments in this map or in this trail where I was like, okay, I'm kind of carving into the snow a little bit. It's starting to feel a little bit nicer, but to me, that just feels like a little, I don't know if sloppy is the right word I want to use, but like the controls just, it just doesn't feel as responsive or something. I don't know.
That's the snow of it. I think that's the part of it, is that like there is a little bit more like you have to react to things a little bit sooner and like turn a little bit sooner, because like momentum with like Lonely Mountains Downhill, it's like you're gripping dirt, or you're like the times that you're not as responsive and steering is when you're on grass. Whereas like this one, like you have, I think, a slower response time on the snow, and then you have an even slower response time on ice and like like hard packed snow. So like you do have to it takes a lot harder turns and a lot more like commitment to a direction than Lonely Mountains Downhill does.
And it's a difference between, acceleration and top speed, basically. In this game, it's very much slow acceleration, but much higher top speed.
I think that's what it is. Yeah, the main difference. Where like, because you are typically like wiping out quite a bit, it's like in Lonely Mountains Downhill, to me, it felt more immediate of like, just get right back into the action, where this is like, okay, depending on where I'm at, I got to wipe out and let me trudge through this, like, snowshoe section again before I get down to the slope.
You might be wiping out a lot.
I will say I probably crash less in this game than I do in Lonely Mountains Downhill, but partially because I'm like less tempted to go for the shortcuts and stuff, because I don't find... I just don't find the carving up and doing the jumps to be all that fun, because like when you're jumping, you're like you're out of control of your character. You're just kind of like, okay, just line up the jump perfectly before I hit that, which I guess it's kind of the same in Lonely Mountains Downhill too, but there's just
jumps
more
you lose speed
agility
on, but you can cut across a lot larger portions of the map.
Yeah, there are some cool jumps that are like shortcuts, and like again, in both games they do this, but like that very cool jumps that are like clearly like, oh, you're just jumping over like from one side to the other. And like I said, I was just starting to the last trail I played, starting to be like, okay, I'm liking this more. So I don't want to come off too negative. And I did go into this with extremely high hopes, but my immediate reaction was just like, oh man, this is nowhere near as good as Lonely Mountains Downhill. even though they have made some improvements to like the quality of life and the menus. And have either of you guys tried any of the multiplayer stuff at all?
No,
because that seems like it's almost the focus. Like it's the first option to select in the menu right at the title screen or whatever.
No, I also had a pretty significant issue of like getting stuck at the tutorial because it wouldn't register like button presses.
No.
And like I know that it's had some issues with Steam Deck like always, but I had to I had to play it handheld for it to actually register button presses for certain things, which is fine. Like it worked eventually.
Yeah, at least it works. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I've not done any multiplayer stuff, and also I've done Zen mode, and it's I don't know. I actually
that.
Saying like the Explorer mode is like I kind of loved that. I loved going on a new trail and being like I don't even know where the checkpoints are, and like the first time you go past it is like it's triggering this. This is where it's the next one is like.
I did like that too. I know what you mean, but it would make me kind of mad when I did. I was like, man, I did that pretty good. And like, I feel like I would have gotten those challenges. Like, I feel like I shouldn't have to do them again. It should have just like by default, even if it didn't tell me what they were, just like give it to me. If I beat it in the time, just give it to me.
Just wipes out a good feeling run sometimes.
Yeah. But I do know what you mean. I like that like no stakes of like, okay, I'm just going to go hog wild. I'm just going to try this shortcut a million times or like, force my way to this shortcut that isn't even really one, but it feels like it can be one.
And I also miss the free run of like where there's no checkpoints and you just have to get to the bottom in one go.
They don't have that in this. Yeah. Cause it's just the 2 challenges. Yeah. It's like they like kind of streamlined it a little bit in that regard.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that they're going to add more, and they probably will. Like that's what
I feel like they added a lot of DLC to Downhill. So I'm definitely, I don't want to come off too sour on it because, like I said, I was definitely on the upswing the last session I had with it right before, and I only played for like about 20 minutes there. But yeah, and again, went in with super high hopes, and that's like almost the worst recipe for like being disappointed in the game. Like, let me go into this game so pumped and like expecting it to be my favorite game ever. Like, what a recipe for disappointment. Yeah. But nonetheless, and part of me is like I don't want to dig in too deep again because number one, it's on Game Pass, and I'm letting my subscription lapse in a month here,
right?
And so it's like, okay, let me just wait for it to come out on, because I think otherwise it's only out on PC, or maybe it's out on PS5 and whatnot, but it's not out on Switch yet. So I got to either wait for it to get the Switch 2 treatment or wherever it ends up coming out on a platform of my choosing, but. I know my laptop certainly wouldn't be able to handle this. And I was playing on the cloud for whatever it's worth, and it ran pretty nicely on the couple little like, visual buffering moments here and there, but nothing that hindered my gameplay. But that was part of the reason I didn't dive into online, because I was like, if I'm already playing on the cloud, I don't need to add that into the mix too.
Yeah. No, it's cool that it worked though. And I definitely agree with John. If you hadn't got there yet, like second mountain on definitely kind of just opens it up a bit more for your gameplay feel and options. That was kind of my experience too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because like I hadn't played much of them prior to today, and then I just pushed through to like, it's like, no, I should really do it. I should unlock every like trail at the very least. And then after I did, I was like, nah, I like this a lot more. I'm glad I did, because I would have been so much colder on this game if I hadn't.
See what
awesome. No, that's great to hear. I know I was going to say no pun intended. But no, I'm excited. I'm guessing we'll probably all be playing a little bit more of this one. So
yeah.
I'm excited you finally had a chance to dive into a Lonely Mountains game proper here, Randall.
Yeah, me
give
too.
Give it a little more time.
Yeah, I'm definitely into it.
Heck yeah. But I don't know, anything else before we wrap things up here tonight, guys?
That's it.
Nice. All right, well, as always, you can find us on the internet at pursuingpixels.com, and pretty much anywhere else you can find anything about video games. And otherwise, we'll catch you next week. And until then, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice. Fuck this game. No, I'm just kidding. But the first time I played it, I was like, even when I first sat down today, I was like having some frustrating moments, and I was like, man, fuck this game. I kind of hate this game. But then I did have a couple moments toward the end where I was like, oh, that was kind of cool. And I was like just starting to. I'm starting to get a little better at the feel of like, you know, pressing like the brake button and like kind of carving left and right a little better.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't touch brake much either. I'll say that. Yeah. I don't know. I guess that's just me though.
See, I feel like that's like the name of the game. At least in Lonely Mountains, that was always the name of the game. So maybe that's like my default, but only when I'm taking like a sharp turn.
Yeah, I definitely did more braking on the last mountain when there's like just so many paths to take, and I was like, I kind of need to make a real quick turn. But like,
yeah,
the thing that I think is, I don't know, maybe the biggest miss for me is like, I don't understand why you do grabs.
Yeah, I don't do it at all. Yeah.
Like,
it just seems
it's like they added tricks into just like, I guess if you want to do it, you can. But
I literally forgot about that when I was playing yesterday. I didn't do that once, and I played a lot. Like the first time I booted up, they're like, "You can do a grab this way." I'm like, "Oh, okay," and I did it a few times. And yesterday, I played for like 2 hours and didn't do it once. I'd already forgotten that was a mechanic.
Yeah.